Hey everybody, this is Hoang, and today we have an interview with Quixotic, who made top 4 in the most recent Nightmare Coliseum. Quix, why don't you introduce yourself?
My name's Quixotic. I'm the reigning DigiRumble champion and the most underappreciated member of the devcast.
Alright, so let's talk about the main chunk of this video, your deck list. Why did you go with 4 Sumemon from BT2 over the new Sumemon?
Because the old Sumemon gives you 2k on your swings, which when you're using promo Diaboromon for the extra crit, which is what you're doing a lot of time, is just using that to delete rather than trying to swing in a bunch. You really don't want to die to most megas.
Do you feel that you ever miss the amount of card draw that you would gain from BT5 Sumemon?
No, because you're really not swinging with your megas or your stacks until you're going for game. It's you're very rarely going to get into a grind game with people. The only time you're really getting use out of Sumemon, the new one that is when you just throw like a Caramon on it in early or late game and just swing in and try and get a card draw and put like a unknown in drop.
Alright, with that being said, let's talk about your rookie choices. I noticed that you do play 8 different Caramons, and then you play the 4 Hagurumon. So while this is noticeably a lower amount of rookies than the most common 14 ratio, I also noticed that you don't play rookies such as Toy Agumon or Gatsumon. Why is that?
We don't play Toy Agumon because it goes back to the same reason as the new Sumemon. Reboot just doesn't do a lot for you if you're not constantly swinging in. In theory, it's great. In practice, it doesn't really amount to much. I considered Gatsumon for this list, and it probably still could fit in there. I just, at the time, didn't feel a need for more blockers and wanted to have a cheap drop in the 2 cost.
Moving on from level 3, let's talk about your level 4 choices. Noticeably, you do play 8 Kurisarimon and then the 4 Shademon. Now, Shademon's really interesting because Shademon is a security Digimon, which is not very common in the game at the moment. Would you like to tell us why you play the Shademon?
We play the Shademon first because it is searchable off of Caramon when you're desperate for a blocker, which this deck doesn't have a easy access to like a lot of other black builds would. And second, we run it because your last ulti in this deck, if it's not one of your Kurisari, it's useless for aggro. The cheap Evo doesn't mean much. If you're not getting value off of your token spawns, then the stack is meaningless. So you're running this just because it does something in security by putting itself on board, and because it could be anything if it's in source.
So, in an ideal setting, if you had both Kurisarimon in your hand, which one would you Digivolve into?
That's not a simple question. They're both really good for their situations, and it depends heavily on where the board state is, how early into the game you are, and generally what your hand looks like. The memory gain is a bit safer because it gives you immediate value off of your Diaboro and Arata, but there are times where going for the newer Kurisari will secure you the game faster than waiting for it.
Now moving on from level 4s to level 5s, we do play the 4 Infamon from BT2 as well as the new Warumanzemon, which is the 2 cost vanilla. I noticed that you don't play the new Infamon or the promo Infamon that was introduced. Why is that?
We play Warumanze for obviously the cheaper Evo and for the lower play cost. The old promo Infamon does very little for the deck. You don't want to be hard casting that. And the new Infamon, it's got a similar issue to new Sumemon or Toy, in which you really only get value out of it after you've already built the stack and have gotten it popped. In which case, a token will be useful or nice, but Warumanze helps you get to where you're going faster.
And I noticed with the BT2 Infamon, you're able to reduce the cost of all your Diaboromons to 2. Did that come up really often for you in the tournament?
Oh, that comes up so much. It means that in a world where we memory choke a lot, 1 errata means that you can go into your Diaboromons and they can't do anything about it. If you're at 1, if they give you 1 memory, you're going to go up 1 and your plays are going to be safe.
And finally, we get to the level 6s in the Digimon deck. We have 6 Diaboromon and 1 Armageddonmon. Now, that's kind of peculiar because 6 level 6 is kind of on the low end. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
We went 6 level 6 mainly because we had to find space for our options and our tamers. The top end is generally the final place that we're getting. You don't usually need multiple. 1 of each, maybe 2 of 1 is really all you need to secure the game. So you're just kind of taking a risk saying that I'm not going to not see these. 6 is low, but it's not so low that it becomes a problem.
Do you wish you had run BT2 Diaboromon rather, over any of the others?
No. No, not at all. Not even a little bit. I'm sorry. It's just not great.
And why is that? Why isn't it good?
The 4 cost hurts a lot. The 10k hurts even more. Its protection effect is interesting and nice, and I'd love that effect to be on either of the other Diaboromon, but it just doesn't do enough for what it is.
And then we do notice the one Armageddonmon. Going into BT5, Armageddonmon was hyped up as the Slayer of Omnimon as it negated the level 7 on Digivolve abilities, but you only play one. Why?
Truthfully, because Omnimon isn't really a threat right now. The only deck that you're really scared of with level 7s is yellow, and they tend to only run 1 or 2 Chaosmon. It's a really good card. The haste 3 Papa Diaboro is effective. It can end games. You can throw it on top of a Diaboromon, like a promo Diaboromon that's already done its job, and you'll have a way bigger body. Stopping Chaosmon is nice. Stopping Omnimon is nice, but it's a win more card that only really gets value if you're already commanding the game.
Now, we're going to go into the options. We notice 3 Catastrophe Cannon and 4 Ultimate Flare. A lot of players will say that 7 options is really high in terms of quantity. Why did we go for this approach?
We went for this approach because this deck lacks defensive options. It's almost a pure setup aggro. These cards both activate their main effects in security, and both main effects are honestly game-changing. Digivolve 2 for 4, as well as spawning a token, which means it will trigger your memory gain, or it'll have rush. It can get rid of a blocker to let your promo swing in, is great. Obviously, Digivolve 2 and spawn a body is... The semifinal round was against Hoang's Crusadermon. It was an interesting matchup. Yellow is definitely the best deck in this format, as far as I can tell so far. And the matchup is probably the most difficult that Diaboromon is going to have. It's not an unbeatable matchup. I definitely think Diaboromon can stay competitive with that deck. It did not help that was probably the worst luck I had in the tournament, but it really is a hard matchup that you have to play well and get decently. You have to see your Digivolves in your security to really swing back control away from how much they just drop on board. Nightmon is a huge problem for Diaboromon. It can pop your tokens, and it's a pretty much undigivolvable mega next turn. Really good in security because it throws your opponent's calculations off completely. Ultimate Flare is big because it stops 2 of the primary methods of play right now. Going wide against this deck is very effective, and this basically says you have to start evolving all of your rookies. You cannot just put them on board and leave them, which is a big reason why we did so well against green. Normally, they would make a big line and just start throwing out bodies so they can get swings in on you. And Ultimate Flare, I think I used it twice in my Raffleziamon matchup, where I just popped their line and then got rid of most of their board.
Is there any option that you think underperformed?
Not particularly. I think I used both of these multiple times. The ratios could change. You could see maybe 1 less Ultimate Flare, or even 1 more Catastrophe Cannon to move it up to 8. 6 to 7 to 8 is generally where I want to stay. You could switch the ratios of the 2. The only issue I had was I don't feel like I saw them in security as much as I should have, but that's more just a luck factor.
And the last cards in your list are the Tamers Arata. How good was Arata?
It's necessary. It's the linchpin of the deck. If you don't see it, you're going to have a hard time winning. It's not impossible, but this deck is what catapults your momentum way above other decks. It gets around. It's not an abusable memory source like a lot of other cards are. It is. There's no way to get around it. They can't stop you from doing it. Once it's on board, it's just going to be constantly giving you 1 memory no matter where they put you.
Do you think 4 is the correct number that you should be running?
Oh, of course. You have to play 4. I was running 4, and there were games where I still didn't see 1. You need to run 4 of this card.
Okay. So, with that being said, what cards performed well above expectations, if any?
Cards that performed well above expectations? Honestly, Promo Diaboro. I thought it would be good. I thought I'd get 2 crit in, 3 security attack in, something like that. But multiple times I deleted my opponent's entire security with this card. Cards that underperformed were the Searcher Caramon. It wasn't bad. It was always good to play and just get something, but I didn't see myself using it as aggressively as I thought I might to search pieces I was missing or to grab errata. You definitely need to still run it. I would never cut this thing or drop it below 4, but it didn't perform as well as I thought it would. The Rush Kurosari is it's amazing, but it was not like a combo insta-kill that I thought it would be. I was times where I just wasn't using the Rush, or it wasn't important, because I already had the bodies on board that would kill anyway. The play in errata, I think, came up maybe once, which is nice, but it's just not really a usable effect.
With everything being said, why did we take Diaboromon for this tournament?
We took Diaboromon because I'm a black player and I exhausted every other option with black. I tested reboot decks, I tested blocker decks, I tested big punch decks, and they all suck. And I left Diaboromon, the deck that I thought had the best chance of being good, for last, and it was great. It was really good. The build is a little unconventional, but I feel that's what makes it strong.
Now, I know a lot of players were talking about D-Brigade having potential within the BT5 format. What are your thoughts on that?
As a meme, maybe? The problem that I see with D-Brigade right now is just that it takes so long to set up that drop. Decks will just delete you. Crusader is just going to delete you. Hexablow will cause you problems. The combo sounds funny with it and Zort, but I just don't see it being a really viable thing beyond a couple of really high roll tops.
Now, can you tell us about what you faced in the tournament and how every round went?
The first round I went against a combo purple, which is using the new demonic disaster to get some restands, using your inheritables to get restands, and to try and get security attack pluses to just delete your opponent's security. That was a very easy matchup. It's a slow deck that kind of has to build up and set up and get the right cards in hand before it goes off. It's really, really susceptible to Digivolve. It basically kills the deck's entire line of play. They basically have to end turn. If you Digivolve them while they're popping off, they just can't do anything about it. My deck is just faster than it. It's more consistent, it's faster, it can search more of its pieces. Purple does have a very good draw engine, but Diaboro is just a bit of a tier ahead. Round 2 was against a Hexablow control deck, and a lot of people thought Diaboromon would have a very bad time with this, given that it just stops your tokens from attacking. You can't really Armageddon with it on the board. They can just start deleting your sources from Diaboro, and it'll stop you from doing anything. The main thing that I found out was that they only have 4 Hexablow, and you just start Digivolving, and they lose access to that for the entire game. There might be some insecurity. They're not necessarily going to find all of theirs in deck. And so at a certain point, they basically have to just hard drop it if they want to get any value. And at that point, it has no sources. It's not going to get any value out of its source strip. It's not going to get any power, so it can't swing over your Diaboromons. And you basically just take it away from there. It's a very easy matchup. Round 3 was a 2-1 against Raffle Simon control. Green is an interesting matchup. I've touched on it before that Ultimate Flare kind of really hurts that deck. Digivolve in general kind of hurts that deck if they're not paying attention to what their source, getting rid of in their source. The worst part of that deck for this matchup is probably Wesseling. Wesseling's so effective. It's so good. You really only have one line of attack, and if they can just shut it down, or if they can shut down your tokens and not let you go for game, it's really hard to deal with. I still don't think it's a very hard matchup, given that you just stay in raising for most of the time. You can get rid of their blockers with the Digivolve, and then you swing in, and they generally don't have anything big enough to punish you. The semifinal round was against Hoang's Crusadermon. It was an interesting matchup. Yellow is definitely the best deck in this format, as far as I can tell so far, and the matchup is probably the most difficult that Diaboromon is going to have. It's not an unbeatable matchup. I definitely think Diaboromon can stay competitive with that deck. It did not help that was probably the worst luck I had in the tournament, but it really is a hard matchup that you have to play well, and get decently. You have to see your Digivolves in your security to really swing back control away from how much they just drop on board. Nightmon is a huge problem for Diaboromon. It can pop your tokens, and it's a pretty much undigivolvable mega next turn. You have to really respect yellow. You cannot just think that you're going to steamroll them with 5 security and rush. They can drop Pedomons easy because they're just throwing rookies on board. Your best answer for that deck is really just them seeing an ultimate flare and getting blown out by it. If the yellow player is not playing properly around and respecting your options, they will probably get punished by them.
With all that said, thank you very much for coming and doing this interview with us, Quixotic. Is there anything you'd like to say?
Shout out to DevCast. Donate to the Patreon. Don't click ads if you haven't. Don't do it. He's already lost his ad revenue once. Shout out to Digitamers, boys. Also, Hoang, you really need to get a better guest for your black tutorial. It's really out of date. Some really bad advice there, honestly.
All right, thank you all for watching. Hopefully you
I love you, Zach.
Hopefully you come around and watch our next piece of content. Thank you.